Welcome back. I'm Olivia Sandusky. We're shifting our attention to Decision 2022 and the midterm elections. Tonight, we're having a conversation with the candidates for Assembly District 47. And this isn't a formal debate, but each candidate will have about 2 minutes to answer each question that are important to the voters right here in the Coachella Valley. So we'd like to introduce you to the candidates tonight. We have Christy Holstege representing the Democratic Party. She's the former mayor of Palm Springs. And we have Greg Wallis as well, part of the Republican Party and a longtime district advisor to Assembly Member Chad Mays. Thank you both for being here tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Now, Chad Mays chose not to run for re-election, so he's been volunteering as our political analyst here at NBC Palm Springs. We're getting right to the questions, though, tonight. We had a coin toss, as both of you saw earlier. We flipped a coin in our studio. Greg won with heads, so he will be starting our questions off. Just an opener for the both of you. If you were to be elected to state assembly, what would be some of your top legislative priorities?
Well, thank you, Olivia. I appreciate the question, and thank you to NBC Palm Springs for having us here. And thank you to the voters for tuning in. I think it's extremely important to have an informed and engaged electorate, and that makes democracy work better for us. California has a lot of problems. When my great-grandparents came here, it was the land of opportunity. It was the Golden State. But now we're seeing rising crime, higher prices, and a failing education system. I think we need a more balanced approach up in the legislature to tackle some of those problems, because I believe if we work together, that there's nothing that we can't accomplish.
And Christy?
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for covering this important election and this race that really is getting statewide attention. So as you said, I'm mayor for the city of Palm Springs. I've served on the Palm Springs City Council for 5 years. So I've really delivered real results to our community. Prior to that, I worked 10 years as a legal aid attorney representing domestic violence victims, farm workers, discriminations of harassment and violence, injured workers. And so I'm really proud to have a broad understanding of this district and this region, and I have a proven track record that I can get things done. In the assembly, you know, I am also third-generation Californian, and I have a 2-year-old son who is a fourth-generation Californian. And I agree, California has some challenges. You're facing the climate crisis, housing, you know, cost of living, crises that we face. But I believe in California, and I believe in our future, and I know we can deliver real results to our communities to make it easier and cheaper for people to live here, you know, easier to access health care and child care, easier to access higher education. And those are the things that I've fought for on city council and I've delivered, and those are the things that I will deliver as the next assembly member for this district.
All right, so let's go get into the rest of the questions that we have planned for tonight. We're starting with a look at the economy. According to the Public Policy Institute of California, voters right now say the economy and inflation are two of the biggest challenges that our state is currently facing. So my question for you, if you were to be elected to this position, what initiatives would you support to help bring some relief to our local families and our local businesses in this climate?
Well, that's a great question, Olivia, and you're right on. Every voter I talk to day in and day out, that's the economy's #1 on their mind. You know, California has the highest poverty rate in the nation when looking at the supplemental poverty measure, and that's something that is a direct result out of one-party rule in Sacramento. We've got 80 members of the state legislature, 19 are Republican, 60 are Democrat, and there's 1 independent. We need more diverse thoughts, and we need to work together to solve some of these problems. We can provide relief for working families right away by suspending the gas tax. In fact, just last week, Governor Gavin Newsom called for a special session to increase the gas tax, and that's something that I'm committed to opposing, and we've asked Councilmember Holstege to join us in opposing that measure because we need to bring down costs for people right away.
To Christy?
Yeah, this is something I have experience on for the city of Palm Springs. Governing for the last 5 years, we governed during a global pandemic in a city where most of our revenue comes from tourism. And so we had to make significant cuts to our budget. We had to be fiscally responsible and save for the future. And so I have the experience as an elected official for 5 years to govern in good times and bad. It's bad times right now for so many working families. We need to do a lot of things to improve people's livelihoods here. We have to build a stronger economy that lifts people up, that provides real jobs with real careers and benefits in this region. We have a region that relies too much on low-wage work. I'm committed to making it cheaper to live here and bring down housing prices. You know, it's interesting you bring the gas tax there, and I'm looking forward to participating and doing all of the research for a special session. And so that's important to recognize. But we do have a two-party system, and that's how our government works and how the legislature works. And so we really need elected officials who can sit there in those rooms where the decisions are being made and bring influence and power to our district. I'm really proud to have had 6 assembly members last weekend in Banning to talk about the issues facing our district. My opponent has received gas and oil money in his campaign. I think we need someone who we can trust to stand up to big corporations like oil and gas and look at the profits, windfall profits that they're making during this time, and make sure that it's not on the back of hardworking families, especially in a district like this where we're based on, you know, we have poor public transportation and people have to drive and they're really impacted. The local cities absolutely oppose rescinding the gas tax. We rely on that funding to get better roads, and that's what our residents need. Chad Mays, our current assembly member, has taken the most money of oil and gas out of any other legislator in the entire state assembly and Senate. And so we really need people who are independent from the oil and gas industries and who can stand up to corporate interests and make sure that the money goes to the people and not to big corporations.
Okay, and you mentioned housing prices in your answer there, and that's what I want to guide the conversation to next. We'll send this question to Christy first, and then you can follow up, Greg. The local nonprofit Lift to Rise says the Coachella Valley is ground zero for California's housing crisis. We've seen a record number of people moving into the valley, inventory extremely low, prices for the housing for rentals going up, reaching record levels. So my question for you tonight then, what can be done at the state level to help people, whether they're renting, whether they're homeowners, immediately and in the future for the housing crisis?
This is why I'm running for state assembly. I started doing this work as an attorney representing working class people throughout this district, and they told me they need access to housing so that you can have a stable job, your kids can have good education and access to health care. So housing is the #1 fundamental right that everyone needs to build the California dream upon. And yes, I am familiar with Lift to Rise, and I've worked at that organization, and I've also spearheaded their housing policy work for the region, and I've also chaired the Coachella Valley Association of Governments Housing and Homelessness Committee. So I'm really proud of the policy work that we've done and what we've achieved on City Council. We've brought in over $36 million in outside funding to build housing for homeless residents, knowing that there's no place to go in the western Coachella Valley. That we also have just allocated $10 million into a housing fund for the city of Palm Springs. And we also put out all of our available land for housing, which is getting hundreds of units into development. This is a supply and demand problem, and we need to ramp up the supply. I've also passed policies on the City Council to make it cheaper, easier, quicker to build, and to allow for more density, which we need to as well. So we're just not seeing apartment buildings being built at scale that we need to see to really house the people who work here. And everyone who lives in the Coachella, who works in the Coachella Valley, should be able to live in the Coachella Valley, and that's what I will deliver as an assembly member.
Thank you. And Greg?
Yeah, housing affordability is a huge problem in the state of California. We've been seeing this for years, and it's not getting any better, but this isn't rocket science. This is basic economics, right? It's a supply and demand issue. We're not building enough homes to meet the current demand of California residents. I believe we're over 1 million units short right now. And the main reason we can do, or that we are in this situation, is because of the California Environmental Quality Act, known as CEQA. CEQA was passed and signed into law by Governor Ronald Reagan, and at the time, the intent was to protect our environment, which is something that I think we can all get behind and support. Over the years, CEQA has expanded and it's grown to turn into a tool that many are using to extort developers and extort builders to drive costs up and force them really out of the state. It makes more sense for them to build homes in Nevada and Arizona, and it's just because of our over-regulations here in California. So we need to reform CEQA so that it gets back to the intent of protecting the environment and doesn't extort our builders and developers, so that we can actually provide the amount of supply we need to meet our demand here in California.
And speaking of housing, we can't forget about those who are unhoused. It's a growing crisis here in the Coachella Valley statewide. It's what it seems like all politicians are trying to figure out. Even as more resources are being poured into it, we continue to have a growing homeless population. What policies or initiatives would you support to help the homeless population here in the Coachella Valley? We'll start again with Christy.
This is an issue that I know is front in mind for so many voters as I'm knocking doors throughout this district, and we really are seeing increases throughout this region, especially in areas like Banning and Beaumont in the past where we never saw it before. This is a result of the housing crisis and the failure to build housing over decades. It's also a mental health crisis and a lack of places for people to go to get mental health care who are in crisis, and it's also a substance abuse and addiction issue because we don't have enough treatment facilities for people to get in, especially that take Medi-Cal or public benefits. And so we have to be aggressive in solving this problem. When I ran in 2017, I said this is going to get worse before it gets better because the housing crisis is getting worse. I'm really proud in the last 5 years to have reformed the housing and homelessness policy for the city of Palm Springs and also our Association of Governments. So we moved from a shelter-based model with Roy's to a housing-first model, which gets people into housing first. It gets them into social services, mental health care, gets them all the care that they need so that they can stay permanently housed. When we had Roy's, less than 10% of people were staying permanently housed after going to the shelter. Now we've helped hundreds of people stay in permanent housing, and we're tracking them year over year, and our success rate is over 90%. So we have to get more programs like that. And I'll just say we have to get more funding to the cities that are on the front lines of the homelessness crisis. When I first started 5 years ago, we said this is the county's job, and it is the county's job, and we should push Riverside County to do more and invest more resources here in the Coachella Valley, and so that we can, have regional equity as this throughout this region. But we also have to make sure that the state is giving this money directly to cities. Small cities like Palm Springs, Palm Desert, we don't get a direct allocation of homelessness dollars like the top 14 cities do. That's not fair. We're not, we're impacted just as much. And so we need to get direct dollars to the city so that we really have tools and resources to solve this problem. And the last thing I'll say is we just need to also do carrots and sticks. So we need to work on programs that we know works, like homelessness courts, to get people into housing and get people into services and on track to lead productive lives.
And to Greg?
Yeah, I think this is issue where Councilmember Holstege and I will probably disagree on. I think you ask any Californian, or you drive around the streets of Palm Springs or down the 10 and Banning and Beaumont, and you can see that our housing first policies aren't working in California. We've spent billions of dollars over the last few years attempting to solve homelessness by putting people into homes and getting them out of the public's eye, if you will. It's clearly not working. Homelessness has been on the rise. In fact, every year Councilmember Holstege has been on the Palm Springs Council, we've seen an increase there. We need to start actually building wraparound services to help people transition into productive lives rather than just trying to put them in housing first and get them out of the public's eye. So I think we need to build navigation centers regionally and locally so that folks have an opportunity to go meet with addiction counselors, to go meet with job training specialists, and to get the real assistance they need to get them back on their feet and becoming productive members of society again.
And if I could just add, because I think you misstated what Housing First is. So just to clarify for the viewers, Housing First means that you get wraparound services. So it's transitional housing, permanent supportive housing. It never means putting someone in a home and then leaving them with the keys. What I mean, and the data shows, 90% of people who are entering our Housing First program in the Coachella Valley are staying permanently housed with those wraparound services. So that misunderstands what Housing First is, and the problem has been that it just hasn't been at scale. And so the state has allocated a lot of resources, but that really hasn't trickled down to cities and counties who are on the front lines. I'm on the Palm Springs City Council. I've dealt with homelessness for every single day for 5 years. I've hired a police chief and worked on homelessness and our impacts. We've hired behavioral health workers to work in our police departments. We've worked on encampments, and I've worked with the county to provide encampment support. So, this is a complex issue. It's not going to take just talking points and sound points. It takes someone who can really understand the complexity. And frankly, that's why I'm running for state assembly. My community asked me to solve homelessness, and that's not something we can do as one city or one region in California. It's going to take a state assembly member who's fighting for our region and our fair share of funding, and who understands the policy and how to get it done.
Well, thank you both for your answers so far. We've got a lot of good discussion that we are getting the answers to the viewers, to the voters about the topics that matter most to you right here in the Coachella Valley. And we're not done yet. We're taking a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about health care. We're going to talk about reproductive rights. So stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Welcome back. We are continuing our conversation with Greg Wallis and Christy Holstege, who are running for state assembly in District 47. We've answered a lot of great questions tonight. But to both candidates, before we went to commercial break, I noticed in your conversations about housing and the homeless, we touched on mental health. And it was a conversation that I wanted to ask you now that we've come back from break with a little bit more time. We saw in COVID-19 during the pandemic, it took not only a physical toll, but a mental toll as well. And my question for you, do you believe that the state should make healthcare more accessible and more affordable to Californians? And if so, what approach do you believe would be most effective? We can start with Greg for this question.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's an issue we've been talking about and making one of the forefronts of our campaign. Access and affordability to healthcare is a huge issue in California. It's something that the state has a responsibility to address. Most importantly, we need to protect the doctor-patient relationship. We need to make sure that those decisions that are made on your health are made between you and your provider, and not involving some state bureaucrat. We need to protect Medicare, and a majority or a large number of Californians are actually on Medicaid right now, and we need to make sure that we're fully funding the Medicaid program so that they can actually get that access to the care that they've been promised. So right now, we have a system that provides insurance, which is fantastic. We want people to have coverage in this state. But insurance without access to the health care you need really is worthless. And we're finding ourselves in a situation like that. So we need to drive down the costs of health care, and we need to be able to fully fund our Medicaid system so that our most vulnerable residents have access to health care services.
Christy?
Yeah, the effects of the pandemic on mental health, I think we're all seeing that. Some of the data impacting students, 1 in 4 students being impacted by mental health conditions post-pandemic is really scary. For those of us who are parents and so many of us in this community who are impacted. Really proud of my work on healthcare and mental health as well. As mayor during the pandemic, I convened a mayor's task force with all of the hospitals, with our federally qualified health centers like Desert AIDS Project, with the senior centers and other nonprofits to really address, what are the problems that your communities are facing and how can we solve them together. Mental health and isolation came up, especially for seniors living on a fixed income, and we did work there to make it easier to hire mental health professionals, come together on policies and funding. I'm really proud to have spearheaded funding for mental health and community health services while on the Palm Springs City Council. We've opened a new behavioral health and mental health and healthcare center in the city of Palm Springs with the county. We've protected an existing mental health facility. So there's a lot more work to do. I've represented hundreds of residents living here in the Coachella Valley who can't access health care, who it's too expensive or the waits are too long, 6-month, year-long waiting list to get into a psychologist right now. We don't have enough providers in the Coachella Valley. So we need to work with UC Riverside and their medical center and do more workforce development with doctors, therapists, all of those mental health professionals to build out the pipeline pipeline. And I've served for 6 years on the board of Planned Parenthood of the Pacific Southwest. We have 19, we just opened 19 health centers throughout this region. And I know a lot about running a health and community health center. I'm really glad that you raised this, because my opponent is sending out misinformation and frankly lies to voters, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to tell voters that I want to defund Medicare. I've personally enrolled hundreds of residents into Medicare because I've won their Social Security disability benefits after years, and then they've gotten food stamps and Medicare access as people living with disabilities. So that's why I have the support of the California Medical Association. I have the endorsement of Dr. Raul Ruiz, who worked as such a leader to guide us through the pandemic. I have the endorsement by nurses and so many more professionals in the space who trust me to be able to make healthcare more accessible and affordable for more Californians.
And sticking with this
topic, I'd like to respond to that real quick, if that's okay, Olivia. Yeah. So in the primary, when we were asked about our positions on single-payer healthcare, Councilmember Holstege stated that she believes healthcare is a human right, and she absolutely supports universal healthcare. Well, single-payer medicine is universal healthcare in California. It's what the majority party has introduced. I don't know if she's unaware of the devastating consequences of that policy, but what it would do is eliminate Medicare and eliminate private insurance in the state of California. If that position's changed, I think that's something we can share with the voters now, and that's an opportunity.
Yeah, can I respond? So that's a big leap. So I support universal health care coverage. I've worked as a disability attorney before the ACA or Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, and I've worked after. And I've seen how people have been falling through the cracks, not being able to access care at all in this district. I support universal coverage. The state and the Democratic Party has taken really important moves to expand Medicare and Medi-Cal coverage to, populations that couldn't access it before. We've learned in the pandemic, all of our health depends on each other. Public health is so important to the functioning of our economy and our governments. And so absolutely not true. He's sending out mailers saying my health care plan. Again, I'm endorsed by the California Medical Association, the nurses who are opposed on this issue of single payer, but who support me and know I have the experience to be able to solve problems for Californians. And that's what our job is, not to be partisan and say one party wants this and one party wants this, but to really how to solve access and affordability of healthcare. And I'm proud that I'll be able to work with all of those endorsements and endorsers to get that done.
Now let's stick with the topic of health care now. We know with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, abortions, reproductive rights have become an issue that have now gone state by state. And that's something that California is seeing right now. We're talking about Proposition 1 on the ballot, adding those reproductive rights into the state's constitution. So my question for you tonight would be, do you support Proposition 1 in the way that it's worded on our ballot? And we can start with Greg for this.
Yeah, great. That's a great question. I mean, speaking of misinformation on campaigns, my opponent has run hundreds of thousands of dollars in mail and television saying that that I don't support a woman's right to choose. She knows that's patently false. I've said from the beginning that I strongly support a woman's right to choose. That being said, talking about Proposition 1, that expands abortion rights beyond Roe versus Wade. That expands rights into late-term abortion, and that's something that I do not support. I think that after the second trimester, without no exceptions, you shouldn't be having late-term abortion in the state of California. I think the Roe standard is something that is absolutely a strong policy, and California is a pro-choice state. The right to choose is going to be protected here. The conversation we really need to be having is what can we do to better support women, better support families, and to me that's making California more affordable. And so that's why I'm running for assembly. I think we need to reduce costs and reduce taxes so that families aren't worried about having to pay the bills so they can have children or not.
Did you want to? Thought maybe you want to respond. We have just about a minute before we go to commercial break, but we still have time after. If you'd like to respond, you have that chance, and then we'll
If I can start, this issue is so personal to me. So many people know that I gave birth 2 years ago, and I did IVF to get pregnant, which relies on fertilized embryos, which is really at risk if Republicans get their way and have a national abortion ban. I support Prop 1. I've actually worked for the Center for Reproductive Rights, and it actually doesn't go farther than than Roe does. I mean, actually, the term late-term abortion is not a scientific term and not based in fact, and just further stigmatizes people who need care. Usually care after 20 weeks are wanted pregnancies where people have conditions that affect the life of the mother or the baby. So I'm absolutely supportive of Prop 1, and you've received endorsements from pro-life organizations that actually protect lives of the unborn. In March, you received an endorsement from Californians for Life. In May, you were asked your position, and you said, we'll have to wait and see, but I believe that should be decided by legislatures. At the time, legislatures were banning and restricting abortion. Then you took down that endorsement, and you said you support till 20 weeks, but you still have up an endorsement from an anti-abortion, anti-LGBTQ organization.
I hate to cut you off here. We'll have a quick second to say goodbye at the end. We do have to take a quick commercial break. We don't want to end the conversation here, but we'll be right back after this. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have left in the broadcast. Thank you to both candidates for their answers. We're going to continue this conversation on Facebook and YouTube streaming live right now, so stay with us for that. All right, I believe we are good to continue the conversation. Now, Christy, you left off with a few points. I apologize for cutting you off. If you'd like to continue, you have the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, so, you know, I'm a lawyer. I care about ethics and transparency. I care about the facts. I've been really careful to make sure that all of the comments about positions are well stated and well founded. And so that's what I've found about your record. That's personal to me as someone who had a high-risk pregnancy, who wants to have more children and might need access to abortion care soon. And so really scary to see abortions nationally moving to ban abortion and even birth control access, and that matters it matters for the economy, it matters for equality, it matters for our families, and so that's my point, is that, you know, I researched your views on that as a voter to know what is your position on abortion care. That's why I've been endorsed. I've received all of the pro-choice endorsements in this race, and received no anti-choice, anti-abortion endorsements, unlike my opponent.
Like to respond, Greg?
Yeah, I'd love the opportunity to respond to that. Thank you. I have been asked many times about my position. It has not changed. I think if we were to go through some of the organizations that support my opponent and assign their beliefs to her, she probably doesn't see eye to eye with them on every issue. So this is blatant disinformation, and it's an attempt to divide us. And I don't think California needs more elected officials that are interested in divisive politics and partisanship. We're tired of politics as usual. We need an assembly member who's going to work across the aisle with both sides in order to solve real problems here for our district. That's why I'm proud to have the endorsement of our legislator and the only independent in the legislature in Chad Mays.
Yeah, and your employer as well. So yeah, I mean, this is the defining issue, really. This is a wedge issue that shows the difference between the candidates. You did receive Californians for Life. You, I assume, applied for and received their endorsement. They're a one-issue organization. They care about life. And right now, you still have an anti-abortion organization that says that their mission is to protect the unborn on your website. And they're also anti-LGBTQ. And it's not about misinformation. It's about voters in this district who have uteruses, who need access to abortion care, who are LGBTQ like me, need to know the assembly member who's seeking their vote and seeking to represent them represents our values and will fight for our rights, which are under attack both here and nationally. And abortion is a local issue because we are a border region to Arizona. As a board member for Planned Parenthood of the Pacific Southwest, we're already seeing thousands of patients coming from Arizona to seek care in the Coachella Valley. Access to health care, we just talked about, is an issue for counties statewide, including in California. The cost of receiving reproductive health care is an issue. So it's not that it's not an issue and it's not misinformation. You can go and look up the endorsements yourself.
And sorry to change gears on the topics, but we did have a viewer who reached out. We've asked our viewers here on social media and through our broadcast what issues were important to them coming up this election season. And something that a lot of viewers reached out to us about was the drought and the wildfires that we continuously see here in California. We had a question sent in from Stephen Kong from Joshua Tree. This is his wording, not NBC Palm Springs, but he says, does either candidate have a solution to the drought or wildfires that includes challenging the unsustainable practices of Nestle within our state? We thought this might be an interesting question to pose to each candidate. I believe we left off with Greg starting. So Christy, would you like to take this first?
Yeah, thank you. Fighting the climate crisis, responding and planning for the future is a key issue that we'll need our Assembly member to represent and fight for us on as a region. As a desert and as the mountain communities, we're on the very front lines of climate change and the climate crisis. I'm proud of my work on Palm Springs City Council, investing in green energy, getting local wind energy to power homes, and our own power program, which invests the profits of buying and selling power back into our community and getting good paying local jobs. So absolutely care about this issue. I've been a champion on environmental justice. I've received endorsements from the Sierra Club and all of the organizations, California Environmental Voters, and so many more who care about climate. Yes, we have to address the drought and wildfires that are ravaging California. And that goes back to fossil fuels and transitioning California in a just and equitable way to invest in green energy. We have the opportunity for this region to lead the entire world on green energy. We have some of the best winds in the world, and we have some of the most sun in the world. And so really excited to continue the work that's already been done to champion green energy and a transition. Unlike my opponent, I haven't received oil and gas money, and I'm not beholden to the fossil fuel industry. So I'm going to fight for our climate. I have a 2-year-old. He's going to have to live here in the desert for hopefully 100 more years. And so I'm absolutely committed to doing everything we can to fight for water access and climate justice for our communities.
To Greg?
Yeah, I think the drought is obviously a problem that we're all dealing with in California. Out here in the Coachella Valley, it's maybe less pronounced than in other areas of the state. We have strong water management practices with our local water districts and water agencies, but the reality is it's not raining, there's less snowfall, and the water's not coming down the Colorado River as in the volume that it is typically. We're seeing more cycles of longer drought, and we're seeing cycles where we have more rain. We can solve this problem, and in fact, the voters of the state passed a water bond years ago to build more storage up in Northern California, the Sites and Temperance Flats reservoirs that we haven't broken ground on yet because of one-party rule and gridlock up in Sacramento. You've got a governor who's more interested in playing politics than in actually building storage solutions for our state. That's something we need to address, and that's incumbent upon our assembly member and the legislature to take action on that. Forest fires, obviously we're seeing plenty of forest fires, and then we get the rainy season and then it turns into mudslides and we have a disaster on our hands there. That's primarily because of mismanagement of the fuels in our forests. We don't go in there and clear the old dead brush out, and so when we're seeing these fires take place, they're becoming larger, they're burning hotter, and they're causing more damage. That's something that we can address too. That's why we need more diverse opinions up in Sacramento, and I'll deliver that voice as your assembly member.
Well, I appreciate both of your answers tonight. I want to give you each a chance to wrap up, some closing statements, anything that you'd like to tell the viewers who are still watching on our streaming services. We can start with Greg for this.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again to NBC Palm Springs for having us. I think it's extremely important that we have these conversations with the voters so they know where we are in the issues. And to the voters, I want to just say thank you all for tuning in and for listening to us. Again, an informed, engaged electorate is what makes our democracy work. I'm running for state assembly because too many Californians are leaving. They're fleeing high prices, high taxes, and rising crime. That's something that we can address, but we need to address it together. We need to address it in a bipartisan manner. And so I'm going to bring bipartisan, pragmatic solutions for our district up to Sacramento so that we can make sure that we solve these problems and we leave a better California for the next generation. Thank you.
And Christy?
Thank you so much. I'm really proud to be here, and thank you for the good conversation, and thank you for talking about this race. People locally are invested in local races or Congress, but don't always understand the ability of an assembly member to deliver dollars, to fight for our fair share of resources, and to fight for policies that work for our community. We aren't Sacramento, we aren't coastal California, and frankly, some of those cities have much more political power than us. That's why it's important to have a seat at the table, to be in the rooms where decisions are being made. I have the endorsement of the Speaker of the Assembly. I have the endorsement of the Governor of California, of the Lieutenant Governor of California, of the State Controller and the State Treasurer, Congressman Ruiz, Congressman Decano, and so many more. Those people know that I have the experience to get things done. You're talking about public safety, you're talking about taxes and limiting prices for residents. I have the experience to do that. I've served on City Council for 5 years. I've delivered a balanced budget every single year. I've served in good times and bad, and I've led our city through the pandemic. We want someone who can take action and who can get things done in Sacramento. I've proven as mayor for the city of Palm Springs during the pandemic. We got to work. We delivered 42,000 vaccines and arms. We delivered hundreds of thousands of food to in-need families, including diapers for babies. And we worked with our hospitals to improve health care. And so, it's nice to say that you can work in a bipartisan way, but getting things done as the elected official is just so different. And I just have to say, this shows the difference, because I appreciate that I think that my opponent, and I know him, Greg, is moderate and independent, and that's what you've said, and that's what I've always thought about you. But you have sought extremely right-wing support in this race. I mean, you've been endorsed by a variety of right-wing organizations and officials. And so I think the issues of LGBTQ rights, abortion rights, how to address homelessness and housing, how to address the cost of living and work and lift workers up, that's where we differ. And so, we hope that to earn the support of every single voter here and resident. I'm so honored to be a part of this process and democracy. People have until November 8th to submit your ballots. You should have received them already by mail. So just thank you for the conversation. Thank you to everyone for voting and doing your civic duty, and looking forward to more conversations about how to solve problems for the Coachella Valley, how to solve problems for Riverside and San Bernardino counties, and how to solve problems for California.
Again, thank you both for your time and for all the information tonight. I know our viewers who are still watching on Facebook and YouTube appreciate just your honesty tonight. And we have a conversation continuing here. We are just weeks out from November 8th. I can't believe how close this election already is. But we'll continue to look at the races both locally for state assembly or our local congressman here on NBC Palm Springs. So we hope you'll continue to join us for that.